Good morning, everybody. We're going to stick with the economy for the next session, and we're going to be looking at the Greek path to sustainable growth and asking what's next. Who better to tell us than Kostis Hatzidakis, who's the Minister of National Economy and Finance of Greece. Minister Hatzidakis, please come up and join us. We're also joined by Pierre Gramegna, who is the Managing Director at the European Stability Mechanism, and by Pavlos Mylonas, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the National Bank of Greece. Good to see you again. Good morning. Please take I'll have this one. If you take that one. Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Gramegna. How are you?
Pierre, it's fine.
Hi. Good to see you. Take a seat, please. Welcome, all of you. It's good to see you this morning. You'll have been listening to, I saw you were here for some time, so you will have been listening to the previous session, which has a lot of relevance for our session. But since we're starting a little late, I'm going to pass straight over to you, Minister, and give the floor to you to give us your initial thoughts on this theme. What comes next here?
I have to go to the podium?
Of course, if you'd like.
5-6 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλημέρα. Μερικές σύντομες εισαγωγικές σκέψεις και μετά θα περάσουμε στη συζήτηση. Αν αναλογιστεί κανείς όχι μόνο τα γεγονότα των τελευταίων εβδομάδων, αλλά τις εξελίξεις των τελευταίων 3-4 ετών διεθνώς, και αναφέρομαι στον κορονοϊό, στον πόλεμο Ρωσίας-Ουκρανίας, στη διεθνή ενεργειακή κρίση, θα σκεφτεί ότι επιβεβαιώνεται αυτό που από ορισμένους θεωρείται ο ορισμός της ιστορίας. Ότι η ιστορία δηλαδή είναι κάτι το οποίο κανείς ποτέ δεν προέβλεψε. Αυτό επιβεβαιώνεται ακόμα μια φορά με τις τελευταίες διεθνείς εξελίξεις και σίγουρα με τις οικονομικές και κοινωνικές συνέπειες των εξελίξεων αυτών τα τελευταία χρόνια. Βέβαια, οι περισσότερες παγκοσμιοποιημένες οικονομίες βρίσκονταν ήδη αντιμέτωπες με μεγάλες προκλήσεις. Μεταξύ αυτών είναι τα λεγόμενα mega trends, όπως η πράσινη και η ψηφιακή μετάβαση και φυσικά, μεταξύ όλων των άλλων, και οι δημογραφικές απειλές, ιδιαίτερα για την Ευρώπη. Ενώ όμως οι κυβερνήσεις προσπαθούσαν να προσαρμόσουν τις οικονομίες τους στις μεταβάσεις αυτές, παγκόσμιες διαταραχές, αυτές που ανέφερα προηγουμένως, με τις επιπτώσεις τους στην οικονομία και στην κοινωνία, προσετέθησαν στο μείγμα. Με τη σειρά τους, αυτές οι διαταραχές είτε ενεργοποίησαν νέες μεταβάσεις, για παράδειγμα γεωπολιτικού τύπου μεταβάσεις, είτε δημιούργησαν νέα δεδομένα σε υπάρχουσες. Για παράδειγμα, η ενεργειακή κρίση στην πράσινη μετάβαση και πώς την επιτάχυνε. Όλα αυτά τα σοκ και οι μεταβάσεις είναι μια δοκιμασία για κάθε χώρα, συμπεριλαμβανομένης της Ελλάδος. Πόσο μάλλον όταν καλούμαστε να τις διαχειριστούμε λίγα χρόνια, προσέξτε, μετά τη δική μας άνευ προηγουμένου κρίση. Δηλαδή, εδώ, αν το καλοσκεφτούμε, έχουμε να διαχειριστούμε μια κατάσταση που ξεπερνά τη φαντασία, ειδικά για την περίπτωση της Ελλάδας, διότι πλην όλων των άλλων παραγόντων που ανέφερα, εμείς έπρεπε να βγούμε επιτυχώς και από τη δική μας δεκαετή κρίση. Φυσικά, δεν είμαστε απομονωμένοι ως χώρα. Καμία χώρα δεν είναι. Επηρεαζόμαστε από τις διεθνείς εξελίξεις. Σίγουρα όμως από την άλλη πλευρά έχουμε γίνει καλύτεροι στη διαχείριση των κρίσεων, πιο προσαρμοστικοί και πιο ανθεκτικοί, αναπτύσσοντας παράλληλα την ικανότητά μας να αξιοποιούμε ευκαιρίες μέσα από τις κρίσεις και τις μεταβάσεις. Αυτό δεν είναι κάτι που απλώς ισχυρίζεται η ελληνική κυβέρνηση. Αποδεικνύεται από μια σειρά στοιχεία. Οι εξαγωγές, οι άμεσες ξένες επενδύσεις, η μείωση της ανεργίας, η μείωση του δημοσίου χρέους ως ποσοστό του ΑΕΠ κλπ. Αλλά θα αναφερθώ πολύ λίγα λόγια σε 3 εξελίξεις τελευταίες που αποδεικνύουν ότι η Ελλάδα, η ελληνική οικονομία, παρά το δυσμενές διεθνές περιβάλλον, παρά το, θα μου επιτρέψετε να πω, πρωτογενές πλεόνασμα κρίσεων που έχουμε να διαχειριστούμε, έχουμε μια οικονομία η οποία αποδεικνύεται παραπάνω από ανθεκτική, προφανώς διότι το μείγμα οικονομικής πολιτικής που εφαρμόζουμε και η γενικότερη πολιτική της κυβέρνησης Μητσοτάκη αποδεικνύεται προσαρμοσμένη στις εξελίξεις αυτές και επιτρέπει στην Ελλάδα να προχωρήσει μπροστά εν μέσω κρίσεων και καμιά φορά αξιοποιώντας κιόλας σε κάποιο βαθμό αυτές τις κρίσεις προς όφελος της οικονομίας του τόπου. Πρώτη εξέλιξη. Ο ίδιος ο Economist. Πριν από λίγες μέρες, ο Economist δημοσίευσε το οικονομικό του πένταθλο, όπως το ονομάζει, για το πώς οι ευρωπαϊκές οικονομίες αντιμετωπίζουν τις μεγαλύτερες προκλήσεις της εποχής. Η Ελλάδα κατατάσσεται μεταξύ των χωρών που είναι πρωτοπόρες στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση σε 2 τομείς. Ο ένας τομέας είναι η τιθάσευση του πληθωρισμού. Βεβαίως έχουμε πρόβλημα στον πληθωρισμό στα τρόφιμα, αλλά μην το ξεχνάμε, είμαστε η τρίτη με την καλύτερη επίδοση, από πλευράς καλύτερων επιδόσεων σε σχέση με τον πληθωρισμό σε ολόκληρη την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, ενώ παράλληλα κατατασσόμαστε πολύ ψηλά σε σχέση με τα σχέδια της κυβέρνησης για την πράσινη μετάβαση και την αποανθρακοποίηση της οικονομίας. Ενώ στη συνολική κατάταξη των 27, η Ελλάδα που ήταν στο τέλος του πίνακα, ολόκληρη την περασμένη δεκαετία, είναι πια 10η στους 27. Αυτή είναι η πρώτη εξέλιξη. Άλλες 2 ακόμα και κλείνω. Η δεύτερη αφορά κάτι που έγινε την Παρασκευή. Ήταν η αναβάθμιση της Ελλάδας από την Standard & Poor's. 4ος οίκος αξιολόγησης και 2ος αναγνωρισμένος από την Ευρωπαϊκή Κεντρική Τράπεζα που έδωσε την επενδυτική βαθμίδα στην Ελλάδα. Η ίδια η έκθεση της S&P είναι παραπάνω από θετική και τόσο εύγλωτη που εγώ προσωπικά ως Υπουργός Εθνικής Οικονομίας και Οικονομικών δεν θα είχα να προσθέσω τίποτε για να υποστηρίξω ότι η χώρα πάει προς τη σωστή κατεύθυνση. Το γεγονός ότι εκδηλώθηκε εν μέσω παγκόσμιων αναταράξεων επιβεβαιώνει ότι σε πείσμα όσων πίστευαν ότι η Ελλάδα θα βυθιζόταν στις δίνες των διεθνών κρίσεων, εμείς έχουμε αντιμετωπίσει επιτυχώς τις κρίσεις αυτές, αν και πάντοτε παραμένουμε σε συναγερμό, για να μην παρεξηγηθώ. Τρίτη και τελευταία εξέλιξη. Τη Δευτέρα ανακοινώθηκε η απόφαση της UniCredit να επενδύσει στην Alpha Bank. Είναι η πρώτη μεγάλη ευρωπαϊκή τράπεζα που επενδύει στο ελληνικό τραπεζικό σύστημα μετά από 17 χρόνια. Και προχωρεί από επένδυση του τραπεζικού συστήματος στην Ελλάδα φυσικά. Ολοκληρώθηκε της Eurobank, προχωρεί η Alpha Bank και στη συνέχεια η Εθνική και η Τράπεζα Πειραιώς. Οι εξελίξεις αυτές είναι απόδειξη ότι ο ελληνικός τραπεζικός τομέας προχωρεί μπροστά, γίνεται χωρίς αμφιβολία κομμάτι μιας θετικής δυναμικής για την ελληνική οικονομία και όλες αυτές οι εξελίξεις δείχνουν από τη δική τους πλευρά ότι η οικονομία έχει εισέλθει σε μια πορεία προοπτικής και ανόδου. Δεν είναι τυχαίο ότι η Wall Street Journal μόλις προχθές μίλησε για το μεγάλο comeback της Ελλάδας. Επομένως, κυρίες και κύριοι, ποια είναι η δουλειά μας? Έχοντας όλη αυτή την πρόοδο στην οποία αναφέρθηκα τα τελευταία 4 χρόνια, υψηλή ρυθμή ανάπτυξης, δεύτερη είμαστε σε ολόκληρη την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση αυτή την ώρα, εντυπωσιακή αύξηση των άμεσων ξένων επενδύσεων, ρεκόρ όλων των εποχών στις εξαγωγές, ραγδαία μείωση του δημοσίου χρέους ως ποσοστό του ΑΕΠ, μείωση της ανεργίας κατά 7 ποσοστιαίες μονάδες. Η δουλειά η δικιά μας και η δική μου προσωπικά στο Υπουργείο Εθνικής Οικονομίας και Οικονομικών είναι να συνεχίσουμε την καλή πορεία. Δεν έχουμε εφεύρει τον τροχό. Εκείνο που κάνουμε είναι εφαρμόζουμε πετυχημένες ευρωπαϊκές και διεθνείς πρακτικές. Θα έλεγα ότι αυτό που συντελείται είναι η επανάσταση της κοινής λογικής μετά από πολύ καιρό στην Ελλάδα και αυτό θα συνεχίσουμε να κάνουμε. Επιταχύνοντας μεταρρυθμίσεις όπου είναι αναγκαίο, παραδείγματος χάριν αξιοποίηση της δημόσιας περιουσίας, παραδείγματος χάριν αντιμετώπιση της φοροδιαφυγής, αλλά μένοντας σταθερά σε ένα μείγμα οικονομικής πολιτικής το οποίο συνδυάζει τη δημοσιονομική πειθαρχία από τη μια πλευρά με την ανάπτυξη από την άλλη, έχοντας ως προϋπόθεση βεβαίως το να είμαστε φιλικοί στην επιχειρηματικότητα και σε επενδύσεις. Και όλο αυτό οδηγεί σε αυτό που νομίζω όλοι ευχόμαστε, να έχουμε δηλαδή μια πολιτική η οποία θα αναπτύσσει οικονομικά τη χώρα, αλλά και θα μας επιτρέπει να εφαρμόζουμε πολιτικές κοινωνικής συνοχής προς όφελος των πλέον αδύναμων οικονομικά. Αυτή είναι η πολιτική μας και προς αυτή την κατεύθυνση θα συνεχίσουμε, κλείνοντας τα αυτιά μας σε όλες τις ειρήνες του λαϊκισμού, για να τελικά στην Ιθάκη.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Let me move along. Pierre, I think it's fair to say, and fairly enough, the minister has focused very much on the striking achievements of the government so far, perhaps a little less on what's coming next. I have little doubt that you probably agree with most of what the minister said about what Greece has achieved up to now. But let's hear your thoughts about that, but also about what you would like to see over the coming years, the remainder of the term.
Thank you, Alasdair. I suppose it's better if I stay here, so
It's up to you.
We win a little bit of time.
Wherever you're comfortable.
So thank you for having me here. I'm the new managing director of the European Stability Mechanism, and I'm very glad to be with you here today. I have been the finance minister of Luxembourg from 2013 to 2021. And so I have witnessed in the Eurogroup what happened in Greece and how difficult the situation was. My predecessor, Klaus Regling, was coming to this event every year. And I would like to continue that tradition because it shows that the ESM is a partner of Greece and stays a partner with Greece. Minister, dear Kostis, you have rightly underlined that we live in the times of multiple crises. I think in Greek you could say polycrisis, if my little Greek is fine. And you could not be more correct. And if I look at the title of today's panel, you have geopolitics, which is obviously a big risk. You have technology, which is a risk and an opportunity, and you have environment. Now, Greece has been particularly hit by climate risks recently, and I would like to extend my condolences to all those who lost livelihoods and for the huge damage that this caused to the country. But it is also underlining that a risk like climate risk is there to stay. And I can tell you the geopolitical risk is there to stay. And I can also assure you that the challenges and options and opportunities that technology raises are there to stay. So I'm very joyful, like the minister and like all of us today, because Greece has received investment grade last week from one of the major rating agencies. It goes without saying, but it's even better to underline it. What a turnaround when you think where we were in 2015. Very few were thinking that this was even possible. So let's rejoice about that. I would like to congratulate the government for achieving this, for making the necessary reforms Are there enough reforms or not? We're going to discuss that. I would like to congratulate the people of Greece who suffered, but did well because productivity is now higher than it was. That means the Greek people, they have contributed to this success story. And I would like to underline the role that the ESM and its predecessor, EFSF, have played in ensuring this. In a nutshell, what the ESM has done is making sure that Greece could extend the maturity of its debt in the very, very long run until 2060 and pays a very low interest rate. So it is also important to underline that Greece is immune to a large extent to the higher interest rates that everyone is paying now. So that's an advantage which you continue to have over the next decades. Now, one thing that we must not forget why Greece regained investment grade was because there was prudent fiscal policies, that's for sure, reforms for sure, but also because there was growth. And the growth was because structural reforms were made. And I think it teaches us all a lesson that if you do structural reforms that go into the society, that change the judicial system, make it more efficient, or that make state-owned enterprises more productive, or that bring banks back to such a level that they can extend loans, that they are profitable, when you do that, you have better growth. Now, the growth of Greece has been close to 6% as an average in the last 3 years. Very few countries have achieved that. And you have achieved that, as I said, also because you have better productivity. Let me dwell maybe just 1 minute on two major achievements that we have followed very closely as ESM, is the transformation that has happened in the banks. I mean, the banks were really shaky. They had lots of problems. They were not well capitalized. All this is not true anymore. They are now also benefiting from the higher interest rates, which improves their profitability. And as was rightly mentioned by Minister dear Kostis, we have now foreign players who are interested in investing into banks. This announcement came in parallel with the announcement of the investment grade. And that's not by chance, because if you have investment grade, well, foreign investors believe in your country. I had the pleasure to visit the agency of Greece that's overseeing the state-owned enterprises, HCAP, and I would like also to underline what progress has been achieved there. Some state-owned enterprises did not even remember what the word profit meant and have come back to profitability just recently. So this is also quite an important achievement, and this effort must continue. Let me maybe just conclude this introductory remark to also stick to the time that's allocated by insisting on one thing that is key, and it also resonates with the question that was asked before. And I'll speak afterwards about the Resilience Fund and Recovery Fund. Is it good to take up debt today with the high debt to GDP that Greece still has? The answer is yes, if the debt is done for productive investment. For productive investment and not to finance running costs. Because what we have seen in the Stability and Growth Pact, which member countries are revisiting just now, and I hope that by the end of the year there's going to be a new Stability and Growth Pact, is that the former program was not fit for purpose in many ways, but one weakness was that there was too much insistence on growth and not enough too much insistence on stability and not enough on growth and investment. Europe has suffered from underinvestment for more than a decade. Greece has suffered from underinvestment for more than a decade. We must not do that mistake again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're getting applause from the Minister. That's got to be a good sign. Mr.
I have to express my thanks to Pierre for the excellent cooperation we have with ESM.
Indeed. Pavlos, we're going to talk a little later. I'm going to ask you some questions about the condition of the Greek banking sector and its contribution. But for now, I'd love to hear your response to what you've heard and your thoughts on the banking sector's role in Greece's continuing prosperity.
To begin with, let me thank once again the great organization, Daniel, Joan, yourself, Nectaria, of course, for having organized a landmark event once again. So great job. I'm speaking after two ministers and the managing director of the ESM, so they made great remarks, and I'll try to just follow along on them and not repeat them. I will focus on the preconditions for financing sustainable growth and the role of banks. The managing director said that there was underinvestment in Europe and certainly in Greece. I will try to estimate the size, the quantum of the investment that we in Greece will need for sustainable growth. And here I'd like to make a distinction between what we used to say sustainable growth 2 years ago, which was Greece should have 3% growth for the short term and 2% growth in the medium term, given the aging of the population. And what is the new definition of sustainable growth? Something much more difficult. It has to be growth which is environmentally friendly, socially just. It cannot compromise competitiveness, fiscal sustainability, or social cohesion. So clearly, it is something far more challenging, but it also gives great opportunities for Greece, and certainly, I think, for all the enterprises, including the banks of Greece. And now let me be a bit more specific. We estimate that investment as a percentage of GDP needs to rise from 14% to 18 or 20%, 20% being for the new definition of social sustainable growth. In numbers, that's 27 billion needs to rise to 35 to 40 billion per year. That's a very large number. We estimate about 1/2 will be own funds of enterprises. About more than 1/4 will come from banks. So you can do the math, that's about over 10 billion per year from banks. And I included in that number the RRF co-financing. And the other 1/4 will be from foreign direct investment and from public investment. Now, it's not a given that this investment will occur. We need certain necessary conditions to be met, and I think Greece meets these conditions. And let me enumerate them. Number one, the economy needs to be competitive, to remain competitive. The minister said already, we have highest level of exports in our history. And what is not known is that goods exports exceed service exports. Everyone thinks of Greece as shipping and tourism. No, good exports are higher. Corporate profits are at record levels. Foreign direct investment, also mentioned by the minister, record highs, 7.5 billion just in 2022. And something else, total factor productivity, the way the economy takes labor and capital and produces output, is increasing. That means we're more efficient. It's increased by 6% over the past 2 years, when in the past it's always been going down. The economy has a skilled workforce, including tech focus. And we have a large diaspora, also with high skills, which seems ready to come back. We have political stability, and the comparison to most other advanced economies is, must I say, remarkable. And I don't talk about a party, I'm talking about political consensus towards the middle. Common sense is what the minister said, and I agree. Structural reform, a government with a structural reform agenda. They're not resting on their laurels. There are a series of important reforms on the table: judicial reform, tax evasion, etc. There's fiscal space, also mentioned. Primary surplus of 2% is in the budget. I think it's going to be exceeded as it was this year. Debt service requirements for the public debt are low, many thanks to European partners in the ESM until 2032. Just as important as the debt level is the low debt service. The RRF funds, already mentioned, 36 billion. Favorable climate conditions for renewable, wind and sun. Already 41% of electricity is produced by renewables, and 20% of total energy comes from renewables. We have a geographical location which permits us to be a hub, either for transition energy like LNG, or for pipelines from the Middle East. We have a well-developed energy transition plan, which places a large emphasis on key constraints: the electricity grid, energy efficiency in housing, and electrification of transportation. And finally, another important condition, no surprise, is you need a well-functioning banking system. And the banking system has undertaken a remarkable transformation. NPEs are no longer an issue, 5% and soon below. And there was no increase in NPEs despite the higher interest rates and despite the higher cost of living which occurred in the past year, which is a very good sign of the health of the economy. Very high levels of liquidity, loan to deposits 60%, strong, sustainable capital creating profitability, which is necessary for banks, an underlevered economy, disintermediated during the long crisis, with loans to GDP at 60%. But we are still a bank-centered economy where most firms do not have access to markets. We have experienced bankers who know how to underwrite complex projects and guide capital to the highest and the best investments. With a nudge from the ECB, we have climate and environment criteria in our underwriting processes and are announcing financial emissions reductions targets for all our clients. So there are a lot of opportunities for banks to make money in this transition. It is not just a need, it is also an opportunity, as I said earlier. So the stars are aligned after many hard years for Greece to move rapidly on sustainable growth. That's the great news. If I want to end with a bit of caution, I think it's that the rest of the world doesn't have these conditions in place, and you cannot achieve sustainable growth worldwide by yourself.
So to summarize, if only the rest of the world were doing as well as Greece, then we'd be okay. Good. I think we can probably all agree with that. I just want to follow up with you with one very brief question. You've given a fairly confident picture of the Greek banking system. Certainly, there's been a very strong recovery. You seem to set out a picture where the Greek banking system is in a good place. On the previous panel, it was stated pretty clearly that non-performing loans are still too high and capital buffers are too low. Who's right, you or the previous panel?
I'm right. No, that's the number is 5%, and the European level is 3%. So there are 2 percentage points which I think will be met very quickly. And let's not forget that part of the difference between the 5 and the 3 is the denominator rather than the numerator. We, as I said, we're disintermediated. So if our loans were at European levels 100% of GDP, we would be quite below. So for NBG, we have net of provisions something like 600 million, 700 million of NPEs. That cannot be a problem.
Okay.
And the capital, I think if you look in 23, with the profitability we are making, the capital is increasing quite well, I would say. I mean, for NBG, we're going to have close to between 300 and 400 basis points of CET1 capital creation just in 23. So I think if you look at 22, before the interest rate hikes, it's one thing. If you look at 23, it's different. The investment grade is helping. We're raising MREL capital. So we are, the capital position is improving quite well.
Okay, so you're still confident. That's good. Minister, I wanted to come back to you. What I'd really like to hear is more detail on what comes next. So, you know, I already mentioned you focused a lot on where Greece has come from, the undeniable challenges that you faced, internal and external, in your period, the first period in government, and how well the country's come through that, generally speaking. But it is, everybody so far this morning has agreed there's still a tremendous amount to be done in terms of structural reforms. The labour market, product markets, taxes, pensions, the judiciary, public administration, endless. It's a long, long list. Now, your feet are firmly under the desk in your second term, and you know, the end of this term will be, no doubt, heavily occupied with what comes next, and elections and electioneering and so on and so forth. So could you spell out, to the extent that you can, your priorities in terms of that long list of structural reforms, and possibly your timing, when you aim to get things done?
Before referring to the reforms you mentioned, allow me to repeat here something I underlined during my intervention in the last Ecofin meeting, when discussing the new fiscal rules of the European Union. I said that in principle, Greece was and continues to be in favor of a flexibility approach, a flexible approach concerning the fiscal rules of the European Union, in order not to have a straitjacket and not to undermine growth prospects. This is, let's say, a philosophical position of Greece, something we continue to support. However, I said that regardless of the final outcome of the negotiations, as far as the new fiscal rules are concerned, we continue to stick to our fiscal prudence approach, because except the European rules and except the ESM and except the surveillance of Brussels as regards all 27 members of the European Union, we know that there is a continuous surveillance of the markets and of the investors. That's why, regardless of the rules of the European Union, we will continue to have the same fiscal prudence approach, because this is a passport for new investments, for new jobs to be created in Greece, and so on. So this is a first remark. Now, going to your question, to the core of your question concerning the reforms, I refer to two key reforms concerning our ministry, the Ministry of Economy and Finance. The first have to do with public property, concession agreements, decisions which may combine new revenues for the state and the acceleration of growth. And also, I refer to the tax evasion, the reform dealing with tax evasion, how we can further reduce tax evasion. It has been reduced over the last 4 years. This week, a study of the European Commission was published concerning this issue, the VAT gap. There has been a visible progress as regards Greece, but we have to continue. And I think that next week we will have a draft law to be discussed in the Council of Ministers dealing exactly with this problem. And our focus, among other things, will be to take advantage of the new technologies, digital technologies, in order for us to have all the necessary cross-checks and reduce, through new technology instruments, big data, and so on, tax evasion. But of course, there are some other key reforms: judiciary, the acceleration of decisions, public health, and also the modernization of the public administration. We are committed to a very progressive program of reforms. This is a personal commitment of the Prime Minister, and we are determined to deliver. Declarations do not matter. We have to prove in practice that we are a really progressive, pro-European, a pro-business government.
Okay, thank you. I have to say this translation is excellent. I understood every single word that you said. It's wonderful.
That means that what I said before...
I didn't understand a word of that.
But I mean, you had your...
I did, yeah. Don't worry. It was very good. You mentioned tax evasion. So just very briefly, you seem to be going after the tax evaders, which we'd all agree is a good thing. What about the tax system itself? So do you have any intention to simplify the tax system so that evasion is less attractive or less easy?
There have been many interventions concerning this issue, many simplifications. We will further proceed revising the taxation codes and so on. But except that, I have to mention that this government reduced taxation in many ways. And I think that this was one of the reasons why we have all these positive developments we refer to. Our aim is, after, let's say, reducing the problem of tax evasion, to further reduce taxation, because we'll get, through addressing the problem of tax evasion, more revenues.
Yeah, understood. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Pierre, I want to come to you. I want to take advantage of your external view. Productivity is still an issue. I mean, we've heard a bit of a glass half full account of productivity in Greece so far this morning, that everything's getting better. But I want to take, of course, the glass half empty view. There's still some way to go. So I'm just interested to hear your reflections from outside the country on where you think the blockages are, what you think the government should be focusing on to improve productivity in Greece, which is key to everything else that we've talked about.
Thank you, Alasdair. I think Kostis has drawn a very clear picture of where the priorities of reform lie, and I can, as ESM, only underline and support the view that additional reforms are not only a good thing and a nice thing to have, it's really necessary. And you know, your track record, the track record of the government is good on reform, and I see no reason to slow down, and I encourage you not to slow down, because it's for your own benefit. Now, I'm exterior. I don't want to be seen that I know better or the ESM knows better than the country itself. But what you have achieved in the last couple of years speaks for itself. The most important thing is that with the reforms that you have done, your growth is double the average of the euro area. So it shows that reforms are not slowing down the country, are not reducing the purchasing power. They're doing exactly the opposite. Once one has understood that, well, then obviously the mood for reform is more positive. Now, what is key is that if you bake a bigger pie, it's good for taxation, for revenues, it's good for banks, it's good for enterprises. And it's because enterprises are doing well that you have a bigger pie. And it also helps you amortize social burdens. You can distribute more if you produce more. So I think you are, for the time being, and I hope for many more years, in this virtuous circle, which I encourage you to continue. My second point I would like to make is where I see, because this is also your question, is where you see the pockets where there's most gains. And that is making public administration more efficient, making state-owned enterprises more efficient. Some has happened. Third, the judicial system. So it's a lot around state, indirectly and directly, which is good news in a way, because that's the realm, this is the remit of a government. The government can act more swiftly on what is in his own power. And let's not forget that you get a lot of outside support to achieve that, one being the Resilience and Recovery Fund, because these reforms that the European Union is advancing and pushing, I would like to say two things on this. One, the RRF and the 800 billion that have been put into this is the largest act of solidarity in Europe that we have seen since the creation of it and since the creation of the common currency. If you had asked me if this was possible before the pandemic, I would have said you are a dreamer. So let's not take it for granted. It is extraordinary and exceptional. And you are doing quite well. You are among the countries in the 27 who is implementing fastest. So in every country, there's a criticism that the government is not using these funds well enough and fast enough. Even in the countries which are doing relatively well, which is the case for you, that doesn't mean that it is perfect, but you are amongst the best performers. Continue that way. This is quite important. And my last point is private investment. And Pavlos quite rightly underlined that. The need to have a lot of investment. Obviously, public investment, and then private investment. How can we crowd in, how can you crowd in private investments? There's many ways. It would be a long discussion on its own. But I want to underline how the Resilience and Recovery Fund is helping, but that one is temporary. You need to have yourself and in your economy and in your country enough attractiveness to continue on that road in the future. And I see positive signs on that. And you have become a more open economy than you ever were. You're exporting more than you ever did, which was rightly mentioned. Your competitiveness is getting better. And that will help you improve your investment grade, because we're all very happy that Greece now has investment grade.
Right.
But it's at the lowest level of investment grade. So there's still a lot of potential, and I encourage you to use that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. We're very close to the end of our time. Everybody's ready for their coffee, but I want to give you the last word. So I will ask you to be very brief. It's a very straightforward question. Everybody in Europe, lots of people in the Western world are absolutely sick and tired of austerity and stagnant living standards. You're persisting with a very strict fiscal discipline. Can you take your population with you?
We had a very successful result twice, in May and June. We won the elections. And I think that this result is one more advantage for our economy, because now we can combine the right policy mix, the right economic policy mix, with political stability, Mr. Mylonas referred to. This is a unique opportunity for us. But anyway, I think that we combined successfully fiscal prudence with social policy, social cohesion policy. We increased minimum wage significantly without undermining the competitiveness of our economy and of our enterprises. We increased, after 14 years, the salaries of public employees without undermining the target set in agreement with the European Commission concerning the primary surplus and all the relevant sizes. So we'll continue this way. We'll continue supporting those in need in our society, but without forgetting that the real, let's say, foundations have to do with fiscal prudence and with a responsible fiscal and economic policy.
Excellent. That's a good answer. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel and enjoy your coffee. We'll see you after the break.